she would have at least asked Kamala Harris, well, you know what, the man standing 5 feet from you was almost killed, and some people think, you know, your rhetoric, your side's rhetoric was responsible. What do you make of that, right? But wouldn't even occur to her to ask that. And when Trump brought up the assassination attempt, of course, it just dropped like a lead balloon and everyone moved on.
They moved on. They had no interest in discussing it. Just this week, Melania Trump, who's coming out with a book and is doing minimal promo on it, released a video statement in which she said the following, Rich. Listen to this.
The attempt to end my husband's life was a horrible, distressing experience. Now, the silence around it feels heavy. I can't help but wonder, why didn't law enforcement officials arrest the shooter before the speech? There is definitely more to this story, and we need to uncover the truth.
Very fair question. She's the wife of the attempted victim. And let me just give you one example of the media's reaction to the former is smirking, throwing his hand up in the air like, what an idiot. We're going to recut this with her actual sound so you can hear it. But he later deleted the tweet because he got so much blowback from fair-minded people saying, what the hell do you think you're doing? She's entitled to have fear and concern around this issue. But that's how clueless and heartless they are, Rich, that he felt fine making fun of the first lady, former first lady on this, and what happens within days. I mean, it could be counted in hours. It's so close. It happens again.
Yeah. So, and I don't read her statement necessarily implying a conspiracy. There certainly is more to learn about this. My instinct always is to go to ineptitude and incompetence before conspiracies. I think a lot of these people wouldn't be capable of carrying out a conspiracy even if they wanted to. But I have to say, Megyn, I've not met one person in Republican circles, from donors to grassroots activists, who thinks the Secret Service was in the up and up. That the first assassination, I can't believe we're saying it, but the first assassination attempt, because it was so glaring, it was so awful. It's the exact thing that undermines faith in our institutions, which they say they want, and we should all want. But you can't have faith. One, when the initially the director of the Secret Service tries to stay. Really, just more and more stories come out, each of which make it seem worse than it was at the beginning. Again, I think it's ineptitude, criminal ineptitude, but people, of course, are going to have questions. If it happened on the other side, they'd have questions too. I mean, Rachel Maddow would be doing nothing except for floating conspiracy theories if Kamala Harris had been president and the Secret Service had been so lax in protecting her.
Absolutely, absolutely right. We did recue it with Melania's sound. Let's just watch it.
The attempt to end my husband's life was a horrible, distressing
experience. Shaking his head.
Now, the silence around it feels heavy. I can't help but wonder, why didn't law enforcement officials arrest the shooter before the speech?
Shaking head no. Throwing his hands up.
There is definitely more to this story, and we need to uncover the truth.
Shaking his head. It ends with his head in his palm.
Yeah, wondering why they didn't arrest this guy sooner. The guy they identified, 90 minutes earlier as a threat that they lost track of, that ordinary people there at the event were pointing out. Of course you should wonder. And the idea that's something you have, that sentiment you have contempt for, is crazy.
the inhumanity of the press corps when it has anything to do with Donald Trump or his wife or his kids. They couldn't care less. How many tweets and posts did we see after assassination attempt number one? This is insane that we're having to talk like this, as you say. Who said they're sorry he missed, that they wish he had better aim. People like Keith Olbermann, but beyond Keith Olbermann. I mean, it's just gotten to the level. You heard maybe we can pull this, you guys, the Joy Reid segment with Elie Mystal, literally the two most racist people on television. Truly, you couldn't find two more racist people on television. It happened, I think, on Friday, where he said the reason his disgusting, deplorable fans don't abandon him is because they're equally disgusting. So it goes beyond Donald Trump. It's everyone. It's all Republicans. Yeah. And that's why they have no empathy for Melania, the kids, or anyone who tonight are probably feeling really scared about what's next.
Yeah. So once you've accepted the idea that he is the equivalent of an American Adolf Hitler, then the implication is, one, all his supporters are equally morally blameworthy. They're the equivalent of brown shirts, and violence is acceptable or understandable, at least, to try to stop him, right? So, but the premise is flawed and wrong and perverse. But then you work out the logic, and you get this cruelty and heartlessness.
I don't know what the solution to this is. I mean, other than independent media, I just like the fact that NBC and Lester Holt chose to style the story in the way they did on the night of the attempted assassinations just speaks volumes. Not to mention the trouble that ABC is in following that debate. I don't think there's any saving them. I think they reaffirm that to us every day, and I think it's sad. I think it is part of the problem because they've become the open messengers for this crap, cutting off Trump when he did try to talk about his assassination attempt, not raising the assassination attempt and what it means for this country and about rhetoric in the first instance, not to mention not asking about Joe Biden's mental deficiencies, but when we could go on for an hour about how they fell down in the job. They're part of it. They're actively working now, Rich, to get her elected. And to coalesce around the narrative about how dangerous he is. And having worked inside that organization, NBC News, I can tell you, that's exactly what they believe.
Yeah. They're all basically, at the end of the day, the same people. Democratic elites and media elites, they go to the same party, they go to the same places in the Hamptons, they share the same assumptions, they have the same attitudes, especially about social and cultural issues. They are the same people. And it's just a fundamentally corrupt institution. Maybe decades ago, I used to think maybe if we bird dog them enough and call them out enough and counter their narratives with alternative reporting enough, they'll improve. But they haven't in the least. They've only gotten worse, and it's just there's no sense even hoping for something better at this point.
I can't get over the fact that our president hasn't said anything. The former president retweeted and didn't individually say anything, not even a generic statement about political violence. Michelle Obama, who was so upset about the term black jobs, she said nothing, by the way. Biden used that term too. She didn't tweet a thing, nothing. She's only outraged when Donald Trump does it. And she has absolutely no empathy in her heart for Donald Trump when he almost gets shot and his family. How about a word from her to Melania Trump? You're not going to get it. These are the people who want to paint themselves as our moral betters, as the nice ones, as the kind ones. That was actually Kamala Harris's pitch, right? That was her pitch in the debate. And when she sat down with that local Philadelphia anchor, she's the nice one. And people are ready for unity, but they can't muster any genuine statements of empathy for the Trumps when, once again, his life was almost taken. It's just such a facade, Rich.
Yeah, totally. And if the progression goes the way it has with this one, if there's a third assassination attempt, they'll take it even less seriously, right? When obviously you should take it more seriously, but the standard is apparently has to be hit by the bullet for it to be big news.
Yes.
So and never would have I thought there'd be some rule. They've created Trump rules for everything, where they're new standards. But I never would have expected that assassination attempts would fall under Trump rules, where if it happens to him, it's not a big deal and it's not a big news story, but that's the way they're handling it. And again, basic decency, basic respect for our institutions and people's faith in our politics says you should be outraged by this, such that if you're the sitting president of the United States, even if you don't want to win, even if you hate them, you tweet or you go out and make a statement or you give a speech in the Oval Office about how wrong this is. And they kind of mustered that briefly the first time around, but apparently can't be bothered this time.
And maybe come up with a kind word for Donald Trump this time. Maybe say he's a dad, he's a husband, he's a grandpa, and we really need to lower the temperature, not just in general, but on our side about this man. That's what he should say. But he's nowhere to be found. We have no idea where Joe Biden even is. He's probably asleep. It's 7:30. We haven't seen him publicly in really more than a ceremonial role recently. He's been on vacation for almost all of the past 10 weeks. And I have no idea whether he's even competent to come out and do it. We did find the Elie Mystal appearance on Joy Reid. Here it is.
The way he desecrated Arlington National Cemetery would be career-ending for a normal politician. His constant lies. But even this piece about saying, well, my building was the tallest until, they brought down the World Trade Center. Now it's the second tall. I mean, everything he does is despicable.
The reason why it doesn't end his career is because his supporters are just as despicable, because his supporters are just as ungenerous and have just as little compassion and empathy for others. It never hurts Trump when he takes these crass and classless actions. It's because his supporters think that being crass and classless is actually kind of cool.
Yeah, and they also, he hates the people they hate.
It's just...
this guy's talking about crass
lower.
being cool for obviously zero self-awareness. And this is the key thing too. After the first assassination attempt, they said we need to bring down our rhetoric. And Biden, he seemed committed to that to himself for like 36 hours or so at least. But if you want to bring down the temperature, you got to do it yourself. Policing your own side is more important than anything you say about the other side's rhetoric, right? Because some people actually take him seriously. That's why he's on MSNBC. And if you actually told progressives, you know what, they're human beings too. They're Americans too. We should have respect for them, and we should be outraged if someone tries to commit physical violence against them. Maybe, makes a little bit of a difference, but they can't bring themselves to do it.
By the way, regarding that Trump saying that his tower was the smallest in New York City after the World Trade Center fell, if you listen to the interview from that day, he wasn't bragging. He was kind of stating it to give context about the World Trade Center history during a 10-minute interview that day.
A total misrepresentation.
Yeah, of course. Yet again, I mean, they're doing it to J.D. Vance right now. You saw he gave an interview to Dana Bash today, and they had this long 17-minute exchange about what's happening in Springfield, Ohio. And at the end of it, after saying he'd heard from his constituents, yes, dogs and whatever, cats, pets, whatever, the whole thing, he's saying, this is what they're telling me. She refused to accept that, blah, 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 blah. Finally, he said something to the effect of, look, if we have to create stories in order to bring attention to what's happening, the media... He admits they made it up, right? As opposed to, and if you listen to the full clip, he says, by drawing attention to what's happening on the ground, it's just, as this line goes online, you don't hate the media enough. Go ahead.
You remember Alternative Facts with Kellyanne? They did the same thing. She wasn't saying you make up fictions and pretend they're facts. You bring other facts to bear in the debate that are being ignored. And that's what he was saying. And I think it was in that interview where Dana Bash says, the police have gone through 11 months of recordings of calls, and they've only found 2 Springfield residents calling to complain about Haitian migrants taking geese from ponds. Only 2 calls. And I think one lesson in this whole story, people don't care about geese. People really hate geese. They all things considered, I think people would prefer Haitian migrants to come and take the geese off the golf course, right? So it's pets, it's the cats and dogs has become the standard. Geese clearly don't matter.
I mean, I read online they're protected in Ohio, so you kind of should care, but whatever. By the way, there are firsthand testimonials from many people. Well, all we keep hearing is they're not verified. I mean, what do you do? Do you call the cops? I don't know if you call the cops if you see ducks being beheaded or if a neighborhood cat that's not yours goes missing. Yeah. And this is not just happening in Ohio, by the way. There are now reports about this happening in other states and disgusting pictures all over the internet about what the accusation is that migrants from these other countries are doing. Whatever. I mean, to me, it's like the Babylon Bee got it right. Democrats deny that pets are being killed. would like us to focus more on the women and children, right, being killed. Right? That's
right.
That's the truth. It's like, okay, whatever. I mean, you can get your panties in a bunch about the fact that you haven't seen a Haitian eating a cat on camera, although you might have. You ignore the real issue of the little girls, the women, the men, the children who've died. Anyway, okay. This is the question I've most wanted to talk to you about since we asked you to come on. You said you would. Now what? Not security. I'm not asking you about that. Now, what does the left do over the next week or month? Because they do have to be careful about this guy. They have to. 2 attempts to kill him. And there's got to be some fear in the back of their heads that something they say is actually going to get him killed. So do they take their foot off the gas a little on this incendiary rhetoric? Or is it, we have weeks to go, democracy is on the ballot, and it's pedal to the metal in making him out to be just as horrid as they've already told us he is?
It's the latter. I think this will have zero effect. The first assassination attempt did have some effect. Biden gave that Oval Office address about how we all need to be more civil to one another. The coverage of the Republican convention was more favorable than the media coverage I can remember of any Republican convention, and it was because it was in the aftermath of this event where everyone agreed pretty much that Trump handled it in an amazing and courageous way by immediately standing up and rallying his supporters with that fist pump. Mark Zuckerberg even called it badass. I don't think this will have any effect like that. This will be a relative ripple. Again, as a major story may be gone tomorrow, and they will continue attacking Trump the way they have. They've made Kamala into something more than I would have thought they could have. But the media adulation and the Democratic relief that she's not Joe Biden has bumped her up much more than I would have expected. But they still need to pull down Donald Trump. That's a huge element of how they win this election, and there's no way their conscience is going to be pricked such that they don't use the kind of rhetoric that they think they need to beat them in November.
I mean, if this is any indication, then you're right. Here's Bill Kristol, used to be a conservative, tweeting out. This came out at 6:30 p.m., 6:31 p.m. I mean, that's long after these events broke at 2 p.m. He tweets, Walz should consider canceling the debate with Vance. He posts this on Twitter. He very clearly knows about the assassination attempt. Vance would use his time on the national stage to slander minorities, further poison the national discourse, and incite potential violence with lies. Incite potential violence with lies. Walz could rebut Vance's falsehoods, but why risk the further incitement? Unbelievable, to the point where Donald Trump Jr. had to respond, and who could blame him, tweeting, hours after a left-wing Ukraine-obsessed nutjob attempts to assassinate my father, neocon loser Bill Kristol accuses J.D. Vance of inciting violence. Does it get any more vile than this? You can't make this up. You can't.
It hasn't entered his consciousness that this happened. Apparently, at a certain level, Josh Marshall, less prominent, but he's edited a left-wing website forever that's pretty influential online. He was tweeting just about half an hour ago as well. Let's focus on the main story today: the cats and dogs in Springfield, Ohio. Right?
Oh,
so
Lord.
that's what they think. That's what they're going to do. That's what they're going to say. If I were Walz, I might consider canceling the debate because I think he's going to have a real hard time handling J.D. Vance. But it shouldn't be, because J.D. is illegitimate and out of bounds.
Well, that's an astute point. That's probably Bill Kristol foreseeing what you and I both foresee, which is J.D. Vance doing incredibly well and Tim Walz not being able to hold his own, and thinking, here's a great excuse to get out of it. Let's use Donald Trump's latest near-death experience to our political benefit to try to get him out of what's likely to be a debacle, because they think she had such a spike the ball in the end zone moment. But I will say this, Rich, they're so obsessed with the cats and dogs story. Keep going. I feel like, great. Has the country discussed the problem of illegal immigration and legal migration this much in 2 years? I don't think Laken Riley got as much attention as this is now getting, which if you needed to design a news story that's good for Donald Trump, this is the one you'd pull.
Yeah, and there's some people around the campaign who think of it exactly that way. It focuses on an issue that's just not a strength of Kamala Harris's for understandable reasons and never will be. And I thought JD was very effective in the CNN interview, making the point that never penetrates, that they'll never pay attention to or acknowledge that the real story is you had a town of 58,000 people as of the 2020 census, inundated by 15 to 20,000 Haitian migrants. They didn't vote for this. It wasn't a public debate. No one said, let's bring them in. And so they had no choice in the matter. But the Biden administration, some of them are illegal, and then the Biden administration is making migrants who otherwise would be illegal legal just as a technical matter through these various parole programs and temporary protected status. And they have to go somewhere, right? And they've settled on Springfield, Ohio. It's the schools are obviously taxed by it. You have a community health center that's spending, 3 times what it used to on translation services, and the wait times have increased drastically. And you have a housing crisis that the city manager was complaining about a couple of months ago. So this all affects the lives of real people, whether cats or dogs are being eaten or not. Even if they're not being eaten, this is still a debacle that is on Joe Biden. So the extent that it focuses attention on that, it is a good thing.
Mm-hmm. Oh, God, it's just, all of this is just so awful. It's so dark. And it's so frustrating to see them just not care. But, back to the old Maya Angelou. When someone shows you who they are,
there you
leave
go.
them. We believe in you, Rich Lowry. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. I hope we don't do another one of these.
Yeah, exactly.
I hope there's
Hopefully
not a
we'll be
third.
talking about
Yeah.
benign political news next time. Great to see you.
All right. Thanks so much.
Up next, we're going to bring on you two. We're going to bring on Susan Crabtree. You guys know that name, right? She's from Real Clear Politics. And she owned the Secret Service story after the first assassination attempt. This is how we're going to have, how it's like first impeachment, second impeachment, and we have the first criminal trial. But then there were 3 more criminal trials waiting, right? It's just crazy about the amount of stuff that they try to throw at Donald Trump, but you can't even keep track. How many impeachments? Okay, there's 2, and there's 4 criminal cases, but there were also 3 civil cases trying to get added up, and now there's been 2 assassination attempts. And I mean, this is absolute madness. And you mark my words, these Democrats are going to try to make it all Donald Trump's fault in that, aren't you kind of over him? He's so controversial. It's like his own fault. He's so controversial. He keeps getting shot at. Like, aren't you ready to move on from that? Like, a new way forward, as Kamala Harris is saying. Like, he's controversial. It's not our rhetoric about him. It's not our messaging about him. Not saying he's controversial, but saying he's Hitler. That has amped up the temperature. Anyway, Susan Crabtree is here, and she's got the latest for us on today's assassination attempt of our former president, Donald Trump. Susan, thank you so much for joining us. What have you learned? What's interesting to you so far about the facts?
What's really interesting to me, Megan, and thanks so much for having me on, is that this guy, we are hearing now, I'm getting law enforcement confirmation, even though the FBI is not confirming, that his name is Ryan Ruth, and they're leaving up all of his social media. He apparently used his daughter's car. He's a 58-year-old a man who has a very public social media profile, and he seems very unsophisticated, unless it's a false flag. And this is what I'm incredibly worried about after today. You've had 2 assassination attempts. The FBI says it looks like the first one, Thomas Crooks, was acting alone, that there was no foreign influence that they can see so far in their investigation, even though they only had one briefing with the media since the day of Butler rally, the first assassination attempt. But I am seriously concerned that this shows the Iranians, IRGC, that we know from what Grassley released last week, are plotting a very detailed assassination plots. They are current and granular against Donald Trump. And this is showing them what kind of vulnerabilities the Secret Service has. Now, the Secret Service got a lot of plaudits today about the way they handled this. They shot first. They didn't wait to shoot. You had Thomas Crooks running across the roof, and they weren't shooting at him yet. They didn't even know about him. They didn't know he had a gun until just minutes beforehand, when he popped his head up. That's when they finally found out that he was a real threat, not just a suspect. But in this case, we had this detailed assassination proffer that the FBI, well, actually Grassley got hold of it, but the FBI was incensed that Grassley put this out. And it was basically the proffer is an interrogation that the FBI does with this man, this Pakistani citizen with deep ties to Iran. He spent 2 weeks in Iran, and he was arrested the day before the Butler rally for planning an assassination attempt against Donald Trump and actually trying to hire hitmen in New York and pay them $5,000. So,
Oh my God, it's terrifying.
I mean, if you haven't read, I will say to your viewers, if you have not read what Grassley put out, I have tweeted about it. I tweeted about it again today. It is basically the interview that the FBI conducted with this man named Asif Merchant, who they arrested on July 12th, the day before the Butler assassination attempt. So you can see exactly the interview. He was in an Iranian safe house talking with a man they identified as Youssef about whether they should target a outdoor rally or an indoor rally, whether they should use a pistol or whether they should use a rifle. They said they evaluated all the Secret Service assets that Donald Trump was using. And we know from we know now it's been we're all well aware that he was being treated as a former president, just like Barack Obama or Jimmy Carter. He was not being afforded. It was not threat-based, as the Secret Service claims they always operate threat-based. But we know now that that was not the case with Donald Trump before Butler. So they were evaluating, this Asif Merchant was evaluating in an Iranian safe house, the assets that the Secret Service was using pre-Butler to protect Trump. And they assessed that they probably had a 50-50 chance of being successful in their assassination attempt. I mean,
Wow.
it was chilling. It was downright chilling.
Do we know the percentage beef up in Secret Service from assassination attempt number 1 to today?
Yeah, well, I just was getting into this on Twitter and people are taking issue with me. I am told that it's far more than he had before. Okay, obviously. He only got his counter sniper the day before the Butler rally. When they were arresting, the FBI was arresting the man I just mentioned, okay, for assassination attempt. But it's far more than what he had before. It's almost what I'm hearing. It's almost what a sitting president gets, minus the military assets. Of course, he doesn't have Marine One, doesn't have Air Force One, doesn't have the extra agents that carry the nuclear football with him, doesn't have a military aid. But the key question, I think, for today is whether he had the security perimeter. Does he have, they didn't have a security perimeter, because this guy, Ryan Ruth, got right up to the fence and was poking his rifle through the AK-47, right through. And that's the only thing the Secret Service saw that indicated that there was a threat. And it was, he was it was in between the 5 and 6 hole on the golf course. And thank goodness the Secret Service, we had a good team around him.
Was it Secret Service? Do we know, Susan? Was it Secret Service, like proper?
Yes, absolutely. The Secret Service, yes, the sheriff, Bradshaw, the Palm Beach Sheriff Bradshaw did say it was Secret Service, and he said they acted in a fantastic manner today, and was shooting, but did not shoot him. Okay, one of my Secret Service sources in that community said, well, they didn't shoot him. Well, he was hiding in the bushes.
Yeah.
But the key
is
question,
is that confirmed that he definitely did not pull the trigger first? Because some online are saying be careful. Okay,
well, that's what the law enforcement is saying. That's the official word. My Secret Service sources haven't said anything against that so far. They haven't. They don't say.
Is it in any way a breach of protocol for them to shoot somebody who's got an AK-47 style rifle 300 feet from the president?
No.
Obviously, right. They can shoot first.
No, what the whole issue for Butler that I was reporting early that people were taking issue with was it is in their culture, if they don't see a gun, not to shoot. If they can't make out that it's an actual gun, if it's not a toy gun, but if at this point, that's out the window. They're going to shoot. They're going to shoot if they see a gun. The suspect becomes a threat when you see the gun and pointed towards the president
Yeah.
or the former president.
what-
That's
What
when
if
it
anything
becomes
do
the
they
threat.
say? What if anything do they say about the fact that, you know, we're grateful that these Secret Service agents noticed the gun and saw this guy hiding, but also there are questions about why he was relatively unprotected so close to the open road. This guy just came up to the chain link fence and shoved his gun in one of the links and almost took out Donald Trump. Like, to me, that does seem like a failure of imagination or planning.
Well, what I want to know is, does Joe Biden get a security perimeter when he plays golf? Is it the exact same security assets does Biden
Good
have
question.
that did Trump get that same security assets today? Because we know they're available because Biden's not using them. Okay. So obviously, that's the big question in my mind. And how many assets were there? Were the counter surveillance units. They were not there at Butler. Were they there today? Did Donald Trump say, well, I really like to play golf, so I need to interact with, he had his friend and donor with him, his good friend, Stephen Witkoff with him. Maybe they wanted to be able to be more accessible to the public. I don't know. I'm asking the Trump campaign, is that something? There's a balance to be struck always with the candidate wants. You can't put Trump now. Of course, they're going to reevaluate everything in terms of they instituted the bulletproof glass last time on outdoor rallies. I'm wondering, if they have designed some type of Pope mobile that he has to be in now if he wants to go out. It's a sad situation. But there's always this balance to be struck. The Secret Service would like him to stay indoors and operate like, maybe like Biden did during the 2020 election. Is that...
That's not Trump.
Yeah, it's not Trump. He wants to interact. So you have to strike a balance. But what I want to know is, obviously, this was a perimeter problem. We had a perimeter problem in Butler. They put the AGR building outside the perimeter. There's questions surrounding why that happened, in addition to why there was nobody on the roof. I'm told by my Secret Service sources, as recently as yesterday, that I've gone back and forth. I've talked to the Butler law enforcement. They say one thing. The Secret Service sources say another, that it was law enforcement's fault that day. They were in charge. The Secret Service charged them with protecting that building, and they chose to go inside because it was hot. I believe that's the case. I've had multiple sources tell me that. And so, please come forward and show me the plan that had the Secret Service say they have a post plan where they show where everybody's supposed to be. The one thing that I will say, it's still on the Secret Service because they did not go through their checks. I'm told, long ago in the Secret Service, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, you had, when everybody was ready, when there was 5 minutes, they call it Bravo, 5 minutes till Trump goes on, you do a security check. Everybody in their post that they were assigned to, yep, and they go through, their supervisor goes through. Everybody's at where they're supposed to be. That did not occur at Butler, or the lead agent, when we know who she is, the lead agent from the Pittsburgh field office was not checking that day and allowed them, when they protested, to go inside. So I'm still worried about this. They're still leaving these perimeters open. And, Trump has got to reevaluate how he's going to operate from now on. I mean, he has to do some
private
soul
security.
searching.
I think he needs private security.
Yeah,
I don't.
It's sad because the Secret Service that he has now, I'm sure he has the best that the agency has to offer now, because the gig is up, right? You didn't. I have been told by multiple sources that Cheadle did not like Trump. Okay, because everyone asked me, was it political?
Kim
And
Cheadle,
I will tell you,
the woman
Kimberly
forced out,
Cheadle.
but not fired. Okay, keep going, Susan.
Correct. And her hand-selected deputy is Ronald Rowe. So, and Mayorkas chose him to move up to the acting position when she left. So this is the same cabal. These are the same people that are responsible. But now he knows, he's on notice that it's on him now. Is he going to be able to keep the position? He's going to be elevated. Everything that you see him do right now is motivated by whether he keeps his job and whether he's elevated to the top position. And I think he's really concerned about what the Donald Trump detail think of him now. All of a sudden, even though I am told he was directly, and he says no at the hearings, even when the senators asked him about this question about my reporting, he said, no, I didn't have anything to do with denying the security assets. I'm told that is not the case, that Ron Rowe has Mike Platty, who retired last week, who announced his retirement last week, he was the one who signed off on it. Is Director of Protective Operations for Secret Service, signed up off on all the assets. So his signature's on everything, but that, Rowe definitely comes in and there's a conversation. He even testified July 30th in front of the Senate that there's a conversation on all these assets. So he plays a role. You cannot tell me he did not. My sources tell me.
I mean, your point is so valid. They had a catastrophic perimeter breakdown 2 months ago. So the perimeter should be front of mind, as Karine Jean-Pierre likes to say. And it wasn't. Once again, it was a perimeter problem. This is what we played a bit of this earlier with Dan Bongino when he testified before Congress about this issue, former Secret Service agent. I actually asked my team to go back and cut the full 2-minute clip that's been circulating because it's very powerful. I'd love to get, as somebody who knows the Secret Service better than anybody, I'd love to get your reaction to it. Let's listen to him.
Sure. Mr. Bongino, in your opinion, is the Secret Service in a better spot today with Director Rowe in charge?
No, it's worse. And sadly, I'm glad this is all being recorded because when something else happens, and I hope it doesn't, I pray to my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ, that I'm wrong. That you play this and go, look, that guy was crazy. You think this is the last incident, you're out of your mind. We have seen these incidents over and over. We saw the Georgia grenade incident with President Bush. They overtook the magnetometers. The Secret Service leadership in charge now with the exact same people. Exact same. Can you imagine a C-suite at a company that makes widgets? We find out that there's a design defect. The widget explodes and kills 10 people, and the CTO gets a promotion to CEO. You understand that's what happened here, correct? These are the same people. Kim Cheadle, the director, wasn't even fired. She was allowed to resign. She'll go get some cushy job somewhere, and her deputy, who is one of the guys behind these stupid waste of time things like agents wearing red ties on the detail, because this actually happened, by the way. These people will tell you this on the road if you get the right people. He was concerned about the tie color of the agents on the detail because it seemed to imply he supported President Trump. Congressman Biggs wearing a red tie. You're wearing a semi-red tie. It has nothing to do with anything. This is the kind of stuff the Secret Service was actually wasting their time with while withholding CSU counter surveillance assets and counter sniper assets from probably the most threatened man on earth. If you can explain it, good luck, because that's not the agency I worked for.
Amazing job by Dan. He was so on point, as he always is. And, you hate to say, I told you so, or that he called it on something like this. He'd much rather not have the I told you so moment. But, man, he nailed it.
Oh, yeah. No, he's been saying that for weeks, and I completely agree. It was Ron Rowe, my sources tell me, that had that issue with the red tie.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah, it was Ron Rowe, and he is the acting director. It is the other thing that I am completely concerned about right now. I was just working on a story about this today, trying to finish it up because it's more technical than some of my other stories. But the fact that they are not using drones, they're really rushing into it. But if you looked at there's an email on the day of July 30th that I put out from a counter sniper. I kept him anonymous, a counter sniper in the Secret Service that was just completely fed up because the Secret Service has, as Dan likes to say, the Secret Service motto is yesterday's technology tomorrow. So they're just not technologically advanced in any way, shape, or form. And there's so much frustration about that. And they put out this new research and development right after the Butler rally, and the counter sniper was taking issue with that. And he said, "Oh, too little, too late." And he replied all to every member of the uniformed division of the Secret Service. And someone said, did you mean to reply all? And he said, absolutely. And he downloaded, yes,
Wow.
Absolutely. I am sick of the CYA culture, he called it, in the Secret Service leadership. They all need to go. He predicted another assassination attempt within 30 days. Well, He was
Whoa.
wrong only by 30 days. Yeah, he predicted this. This is, this is a counter sniper person who has a lot on the line, but people are rank and file members are just fed up by the leadership. And there has been this slow roll on lowering the standards in the Secret Service for the last 10 years because of a lot of reasons. That Cheadle was very big on the 30 by 30 initiative, meaning 30%
Ridiculous.
women agents by 2030. But there's also other lowering of standards. They say they don't practice with their rifles as much anymore. There used to be much more practice in that.
That would explain missing.
Yeah, when they found out, right, Lass and Butler, I think the counter sniper did a really good job. But we don't even know if there were counter snipers there today.
Today,
right.
They had there's one guy running away. You have two Secret Service agents. They say between 4 and 6 rounds fired, not one hit him.
That's right. And, we don't even know if there was a counter sniper at that event. That's a key question to me, too. Was there counter surveillance unit? They had this bubble. They had some Secret Service agents advancing on the next hole, some behind them, they call it the bubble. But they didn't have the perimeter secured. And so, what are we going to do? What do we do going forward with this? But I'm concerned about the lack of drones because a drone could have spotted this guy. If somebody was circulating the drone, did they have a drone? I doubt they did. And the resistance has been since 2016, and I would say I'm going to have a story about this as soon as I can get it out with this new assassination, second assassination attempt. It's just unbelievable to me. But they have leadership has resisted this since 2016. They have had information, very detailed information. Congress now has that detailed information about why they should have a drone program. They've had people wanting to do it, and they've denied them the ability to participate in the drone program. They have tethered drones at permanent sites like Camp David and the White House, but they don't use regular drones. And there are people up in arms, and that was one of the issues that the counter sniper was taking, the anonymous one that sent that email was taking issue with that day.
That's
He was
crazy.
basically, this is too little too late, $1 too short, a day short. It's just ridiculous.
If this guy Ron Ruth is the one who made all these mistakes and was focused on the color of the ties, and once again didn't secure the perimeter, he's got to go too. Who's going to get fired? I just asked this. Trump said this the other day during the debate. He's like, they don't fire anybody. They didn't fire the people responsible for the disastrous Afghanistan withdrawal. Nothing can get you fired by this administration. The first assassination attempt did not result in Kim Cheadle being fired. She was forced out, but she was given the dignity of resigning, which she should not have been afforded. And now here we are again with another guy obsessed with tie color, too focused on that apparently to keep the president safe. I'm sorry, hats off to the 2 Secret Service guys, or however many it was ultimately, who saw the shooter in the bushes. But there was obviously a perimeter problem. Even I can see that.
Absolutely. And the 2 people, there's a lot of dissension going on between the Pittsburgh field office. They put 4 people on work from home leave, and they only put 1 on from the Donald Trump detail. So there's a lot of people saying, well, that's not fair. We didn't even know, and I'm breaking this news on your show today, we didn't even know about the Iranian threat. And the Donald Trump detail did know about the Iranian threat. The field offices are very resentful of that. But Mike Platty, who's the assistant director of operations, protective operations, he was encouraged to retire. Encouraged to retire.
That's the closest
the direct quote. That is the direct quote. Now, I'm told that people like him, he's a good guy, but he was too much of a yes man because he did sign off on all those denials that Roe and Cheadle were pressuring him to do. And we can also talk about, Cheadle's role in the, cocaine cover-up issue, if you would like. There's
what did happen there?
Layers and layers of problems here. It's kind of this, it's an unbelievable place. So, we have too much. When you have the director of the Secret Service being selected by a sitting president, there's a problem. You had Jill Biden very involved in Kimberly Cheadle's ability to get that Pepsi job at PepsiCo. For instance, that's where she came from. She was assigned to the vice president's detail, and that's how she got close to the Biden family and Jill Biden. And so when it came time to name someone, they named someone who was the closest to them. I'm told that this was not a good hire, that she did not have the right reputation.
We saw.
Yeah. And the fact is that, you have too much that there was a Blue Ribbon Commission that I covered in 2015 that said the number one problem is the Secret Service director should be appointed from the outside. It should not be someone who came from within the ranks, because there's this sort of cabal. Well, what happened with the cocaine, I'm told, and I've written a story about this that you can see on Real Clear Politics website if you look under my name, that Kimberly Cheadle was pressuring the Forensic Services Division to destroy the cocaine. And it was they got a partial DNA hit. They sent it to the Department of Homeland Security. They sent it to the FBI. They got a partial DNA hit on the bag of cocaine. No fingerprints, but they got a partial DNA hit, meaning, I had to have that explained to me, meaning that there was somebody that was a relative that they had some fingerprints on, they had some DNA already, and they had a partial match, a family member, okay? But they were not willing to go and interview all the people that was in the White House complex that weekend. It was a very slow weekend, but she was trying to get that cocaine destroyed. And I will have another supplement article about this. And she was forcing the Forensic Services Division chief named Glenn Dennis to destroy it. And this other person in the uniform division, who was the one who found it, they are the ones who found it. Those are the people that really protect the White House. You see them standing around the White House, the uniform division, not the special agents. They found it. And so their boss said, no, I really, really don't want, we have a protocol here. It's a 7-year protocol. We keep our evidence in that evidence vault. Okay. And he said, no. He was acting at the time, head of the uniform division. He was a Black guy. And, Cheadle really loves the diversity, equity, and inclusion program. She was big on DEI, but he wasn't elevated to the position. They hired someone from the outside, a different person, a white man, to take that position ahead of him. And that raised a lot of eyebrows, because they were, okay, so people in the Secret Service community know that they were just trying to destroy that, and they did not do a good job with that investigation. They, as you know, Megan, they have these waves reports that everybody who comes into the White House complex on any given day, you have those records. So it was the Sunday before July 4th. So it was a very slow weekend. The president's family had gone to Camp David, and then they came back for July 4th. Okay. It was a very limited number of people in the White House complex that weekend. They could have interviewed those people. They're the Secret Service. Are you telling me, one of my sources said, are you telling me that as a Secret Service, we're projecting outward that we cannot find somebody within all the workers, 500 workers at the White House complex? You're just broadcasting that we're not able to investigate that properly by saying that we didn't want to violate their civil rights. Was the excuse that Anthony Guglielmi, the spokesman, that I've had a contentious relationship
he's
with.
the one who kept tweaking you. When you were reporting early on about Butler, and all of your information turned out to be right, he was openly saying, you're wrong, Susan. He was tweeting openly saying, you're wrong. So it was pretty extraordinary, because usually the Secret Service will stay quiet, or if they know that they're going to say a lie, they'll dodge, or they'll say it, without their name attached to it. He attached his name in openly trying to crap on all of your reporting. And did you ever get an apology from him when it all turned out to be correct?
I'm not sure I can say. I've had discussions with him about that, and I've told him I'm extremely unhappy about that. They are working with me better, I will say. Not great.
Oh, I'll
but
bet.
Better. But I will say that I've known, and I put that out there. I said, okay, you want to do that? You didn't answer all of my questions. And I took a screenshot of the 6 very detailed questions I asked them the day after the assassination. I said, you don't want to answer me. You don't want to call me. You have my number. I had just talked to him 1 month before because there was, we had some warning signs about problems within the Secret Service just a month before, when we had a woman, her name is Michelle Herzig, unfortunately have a mental breakdown at Joint Base Andrews. She was attached to Kamala Harris's detail.
Yeah, it was
And,
a female
yeah.
Secret Service agent who had like a emotional breakdown.
Correct. And she was, tackling her supervisor, and, she had a gun in her holster, so they had to disarm her. It ended up being a security problem for them. It was scary for the agents around her that day. They tackled her, got her gun away from her. And I'm told that this woman, again, layers and layers of problem, that woman, Michelle Herzig, was actually went through training at the Raleigh Training Center, and people complained that she was kind of off mentally. And Kimberly Cheadle was the head of the Raleigh Training Center at the time and pushed her through. That I know for a fact. That happened. So, I mean, we're talking layers and layers. That woman also, she would never have been hired by the Secret Service because she sued the Dallas PD for sexual harassment, and it was thrown out, and then it was thrown out again on appeal. So that would have been a red flag for the Secret Service not to hire her to begin with. I had been in touch with...
Your point earlier is such a good one, though, when you said that the director of the Secret Service should not be hired from within. Because I understand Jill Biden was all buddy-buddy with Kim Cheadle, and that close personal friendship almost got Donald Trump killed, and it did get a poor individual man killed who had a wife who had 2 beautiful daughters, and... That's on her. And it's frankly, it's on Jill Biden for thinking that her buddy was qualified just because she knew this person would run cover for her. So your point, because I don't care that the first family is comfortable with Kim Cheadle when they made the selection. What I care about is us. Rich Lowry was on half an hour ago saying, can you imagine if this had been successful? Like how it would have divided the country. It would have torn us in two. Especially in the wake of the first assassination attempt. I mean, the volatility that would follow such an event, putting aside the severe trauma to the Trump family, would be unlike anything we've seen in modern history. And so it should not be up to the first family. This has to be somebody that anyone could agree is qualified, above board, is not going to be the little errand girl for the Bidens, etc. And if we haven't learned that lesson by now, then shame on us. I feel certain if Donald Trump gets in there, he will rectify this. Very certain. Kamala Harris?
He was the first one,
so.
Actually. He actually did. Was the first one to name a director outside of the Secret Service. He named Tex Ailes is his name. He was a former Marine general. But the cabal got to him, and they pushed him out. He left when the Homeland Security Secretary left. I think her name is Kirstjen Nielsen. I think that's right. But Tex Ailes left at the same time she did, but he got pushed out by all of the people within the Secret Service that control things. And there's really a culture, and I hate to say this, culture of corruption in the Secret Service. They have uneven discipline. We've seen that since Cartagena. Some people get a slap on the wrist, especially if
that's when everybody's running around with the prostitutes.
Right, exactly. Yeah. It was a problem.
Keep going.
But there was uneven discipline, and there remains today. Even during polygraphs, I already reported this. Some people, if they're connected to, former members of Secret Service, former leadership, or if it's like a daughter or maybe just somebody's friend, they can redo their polygraph. And there's been whistleblowers about this that I cited in my stories. And Congress knows all about this. You can redo your polygraph if you failed it. And what does that say about the standards? No, I'm not kidding. This
really
is what
how
happens.
It's supposed to work.
This is a deep concern. I reported this in a story about Iranian spying, whether it's hurting our ability, the national security ability to protect Trump and others, everyone. There's a lot of problems with Iranian spying in this administration, as we know, with Rob Malley, the Iranian envoy, Biden's Iranian envoy. And so they actually put through somebody, an applicant in the Secret Service. I have firsthand sources on this, who failed the terrorist questions on their polygraph.
What?
I'm not kidding you. It's in my It's in my story, and I also quote an Obama administration former senior Obama administration intelligence official who said, he didn't say which one, but he said our protective services, and he named Secret Service, DHS, and air marshals, they are penetrated by Iranian assets, either wittingly or unwittingly. They have been penetrated.
Oh my Lord. I mean, this is going from bad to worse here. Listen,
Yeah, I mean,
for
it's
one,
getting scary.
I confess I didn't know you before the Real Clear Politics beat for you. And I have since become such a fan. God bless you. Thank God you're on this beat. I assume this will continue. And so let's get specific about how people can find you. Go to realclearpolitics.com, and then what?
You just there we have our list of writers, and then you can click on me, and then you can get all of the stories I've done over years, but in the last 2 months has been focused on Secret Service and this Iranian spying issue. And I just really appreciate, I've always been a fan of yours, Megan, and I just really appreciate your deep concern about this issue and how much airtime you're giving it when people wanted. Before the second assassination attempt, I was feeling like people were moving on, even though we had this very explosive report by Grassley last week with this Iranian. I mean, it was detailed, but it wasn't getting that much play. And I think, unfortunately, we need to make sure that this is not just about Donald Trump. Okay, it is about Donald Trump this right now, but it's about continuity of government, and it's about our democracy, our ability to participate in politics as we see fit as Americans. Corey Comparatori, that's the worst thing we could have happen to our ability as Americans. Yeah, the murdered dad, murdered in front of his family members at a rally that he had every right to go to and feel secure at. And so I really appreciate your attention.
Well, keep on keeping on. Go get them, and we'll be following and stay in touch, please. We'd love to have you back.
Thank you so much, Megan.
Wow. Extraordinary information there, right? Can you believe all of that? I mean, this organization is a mess. It's just a mess. It explains so much. No wonder they're dropping the ball. I mean, I realize that the person responsible for what almost happened to Trump today is this man who's now in custody. But let's face it, there was a perimeter problem today as well. And it's even more egregious because it's exactly what was happening at Butler, a perimeter problem. In essence, I mean, it's not the same exact circumstances, but that's what the problem was. That building from which the shooter shot Trump and Corey Comparatori was outside the perimeter. We did just get this in. A couple of things here. Okay. Let's see. We have sound from Ryan Ruth, the suspect. It was, I don't know when this was, this Newsweek interview he gave, June of 2022. Okay, so this is just two years ago. For some reason, he gave an interview to Newsweek. I don't know what. Newsweek Romania. What? Bizarre. I don't know the circumstances, but this is going to be our first look at him talking and, explaining some piece of his worldview in the not too distant past. Let's watch.
More emotional for me is just talking to the guys that have come here. When you talk to a 20-year-old guy that sold everything he owns to come here to fight, that is heroism. He's coming here to risk his life for humanity, for the Ukrainians. Guys that sell everything they own to come here and support the Ukrainians while others sit at home and do nothing. It's an indictment of our entire human society to say, hey, where do we stand? Do we stand for good, or do we just not care? I mean, does the world not care? That's the feeling that I wrestle with every day in my interactions with everybody. Every one of us is responsible for the outcome of this war. Every one of us.
It's really interesting. He's in that clip wearing a flag sweatshirt, American flag, and he's got on the right half of his head gray hair, and on the left half of his head blonde hair. He was definitely he's still alive, obsessed with Ukraine. That's an issue that Trump has been ambiguous on, to be honest. Others in the Republican Party, including J.D. Vance and RFK Jr., who just endorsed Trump, have said it's, enough's enough. Enough is enough, and it's time to pull out. I don't know. It's very hard to respond rationally to such an irrational person, but that's him talking about Ukraine, which was obviously a very big issue for him. FYI, the New York Times once interviewed this guy too in 2023, so it was last year, about his support for Ukraine's war against Russia. How? How did he make their radar? Why would they interview this guy? We'll have to figure this out, including plans to conscript former Afghan troops into Kyiv's military. It's interesting. Mary Catherine Ham just tweeted on all of his media interviews, so isolated nutter is going to be a harder sell when the New York Times was happily quoting him as a sophisticated activist. She's not wrong. Semaphore interviewed him. How? Why? We're going to know all the answers to those questions. We will figure out. We will. The FBI can't hide that stuff. We're going to have to figure out all of that. Guys, this has been an extraordinary day. I just feel sort of unsettled, right? It's like, I'm worried he's going to get killed. Right? Aren't you? I'm worried he's going to get killed. How can they stop it? Unless they treat him like he is the current president and respond accordingly with Secret Service assets, Trump is going to get killed. And I have nothing but concern and love and empathy for his family having to deal with that fact right now. Trump, for what it's worth, is typical Trump. I read you at the top of the show the statement he put out. Again, here it is. There were gunshots in my vicinity, but before rumors start spiraling out of control, I wanted you to hear this first. I am safe and well. Nothing will slow me down. I will never surrender. I will always love you for supporting me. Sean Hannity over on Fox News reported that Trump said in a conversation to him something to the effect of, I was doing pretty well on my golf round, and I kind of wanted to finish. He said something like he was even and he was about to shoot a birdie. So good for him, right? Finding humor in this. And I think probably it takes a while to sink in that it almost happened again. I am kind of thinking about Melania right now. She didn't want him to run for president. They had a great life. People loved Trump. He was fun. The left loved him. The right loved him. He wasn't that controversial. He was a bon vivant type in New York. And I'm sure she was loving their wonderful life with their son Barron and her stepchildren, Trump's children. And then he felt the need to do it. He'd always toyed with the idea of getting political. You can see that in a lot of the early Donald Trump interviews where he considered whether he might run for president one day. And they say that Barack Obama White House dinner, where he was just so disgusting and nasty toward Trump. I realize the birtherism, I get it, but really low blows. That infuriated Trump sitting there that night, and they say that's when he determined he was going to do it. He was going to run, and he was going to succeed Barack Obama, and he would undo the things that he didn't like about that presidency. And boy, did he ever. Barack Obama's pen and phone didn't prove to be very valuable once Donald Trump got in there. And look what they've done to him. Look what's been done to him ever since. They ruined his first term with the Russia nonsense. They impeached him. He had spent all his time devoted to that, trying to keep Don Jr. out of the clutches of the authorities, having people like Michael Flynn railroaded. There's no crime, but you lied to us, and so you're going to jail. And so many people around him in the crosshairs. And then, I'm not going to defend his behavior around January 6th or losing the election. I never have. But the second impeachment was unnecessary. They did it anyway. And Nancy Pelosi quickly ran around to all the TV stations saying, twice impeached, twice impeached. They rubbed his nose in it. And that's why they did it. Twice impeached. And when they realized that because he wasn't convicted, he could still run again, they started with a lawfare. That was the before and after moment. We've managed never to do it in 250 years, and they crossed that line. The raid at Mar-a-Lago, the Alvin Bragg indictment, 34 felonies over the same exact act, one piece of behavior, 34 felonies. That moron and her partner down in Atlanta, Jack Smith, thinking he's Elliot Ness, He's figuring out where all the crimes are, and he's going to be the one to hold Trump accountable, a partisan hack. And it fell apart. It fell apart because it was baseless. And good judges for Trump or bad judges for Trump, the law is the law. The verdicts against Trump in the civil cases did not fall apart yet, unfortunately. So he's still facing some $500 or $600 million in civil judgments because Tish James in New York decided to try to close Trump Tower and Trump's business. E. Jean Carroll got the law changed for her so she could bring a lawsuit funded by Democrat operatives against Donald Trump. Same way Christine Blasey Ford found some Democrat operatives to bring her claims forward against Brett Kavanaugh, who Trump was, of course, that was Trump's pick, who Trump defended and stood behind, something no other president would ever have done. He didn't fold. The same thing that makes him say fight after getting shot in the ear is the thing that made him stand behind Brett Kavanaugh. It's the thing that makes him tweet, I hate Taylor Swift. It's the thing that makes him bring up pets and the dogs. He doesn't give a shit that you question his strategy. He's accomplished the unaccomplishable, notwithstanding the odds against him. But an assassin's bullet, if allowed access to him over and over and over again, won't miss every time. It's insane that we now have to use two hands to talk about the number of legal cases against him, and two fingers to talk about the impeachments, and two fingers to talk about the assassination attempts. Let's pray it stops at that. We'll have full coverage for you tomorrow on the show, starting at noon East, live on SiriusXM Triumph Channel 111. And as you know, we drop the show later as a podcast and on youtube.com/Megyn Kelly. Thank you all so much for watching us and listening to us tonight. We'll see you then.
And good evening, Anderson High School, and welcome to the Indiana Congressional District 5 Forum, sponsored by the Leagues of Women Voters of Muncie, Delaware County. And
here right there. Ryan Ruth, Act Blue. $10, $10, $10, $1, $25. So the guy was giving to Act Blue. Giving. And yeah, that's always. I had a feeling he would look like that.
So close, it seems. Hi, David.
Yeah, hey, Eric. Hey, Molly. We're told the suspect's name is Ryan Wesley Ruth, Routh. Not much more known about him at this time, except that he's the suspect currently in custody right now. Palm Beach Sheriff's Office says that he was taken into custody by the Martin County Sheriff's Office, just the county north of Palm Beach, was taken into custody after escaping the scene in his black SUV. According to the sheriff in Palm Beach, he did not make any sort of initial statement when he was taken into custody. They're expected to be releasing more details, a mugshot, whatnot later, but we're continuing to dig into who he is, who Ryan Ruth is, where he's from, his background. We're seeing a little bit online. We want to be careful and make sure we have all of the information correct before we present it to our loyal viewers. But we can tell you right now that his name is Ryan Wesley Ruth.
Boom. Now let's go. How is CNN doing here? Mainstream media, mainstream liberal media. Let's see.
It appears that around 2 o'clock, shots were fired at the golf course, possibly coming from the tree line while former President Trump was playing golf. The Secret Service identified the direction, and the shooter returned fire at that gunman who fled. Witnesses were able to provide a description of an individual and a vehicle. We are told that a vehicle that is close to that description has been stopped by Palm Beach County police, possibly in Martin County, just over the line.
Troubling, and the American people deserve.
People willing to commit acts of violence on a political figure will definitely bring into question everything that has been done and is being done in order to not only secure the safety of all our political candidates and our leaders, but also to address how to tone down the rhetoric and try to prevent another act of violence against not only former President Trump but any one of our leadership.
All right, I hope you found that conversation informative from earlier today. I did speak with the former FBI Special Agent Scott Duffy about this investigation and what is expected to happen going forward. We're taking a live look once again out of West Palm Beach in Florida. This is the Trump International Golf Course, where you can see that it is still a very active situation, as the FBI has confirmed that they are investigating what they are calling another assassination attempt against the former president. We're still waiting for more details to come down from this situation. In the meantime, we're going to step away for a quick commercial break. Stick with us. We have more top headlines next. Welcome back here to Live Now from Fox. We are continuing to monitor this live look out of West Palm Beach in Florida at the Trump International Golf Course, where earlier today the FBI says it's investigating a second assassination attempt against the former president. A suspect is in custody, and the latest update that we got from the Palm Beach County Sheriff's Office is that they are working with federal agencies as they continue moving forward with this investigation. At this time, Trump is safe, and those closest to him have said that he is in good spirits. So we are waiting for more details. It's still very active, still very fluid, as you see at this time. So while we wait for that, we do want to pivot to some other top headlines that we are following here. Thank you once again for joining us on this Sunday. I'm your host, Karal Lahara. Let's get into some international news that we are monitoring. Take a look at this here on your screen, some video and a story that we are following. 3 Americans, 2 Spaniards, and a Czech citizen reportedly arrested in Venezuela, accused of plotting to assassinate President Nicolás Maduro. The arrests were announced by state TV in Venezuela's Interior Ministry on Saturday. Now, the group accused of being part of an alleged CIA plot to overthrow the Venezuelan government and kill members of its leadership. Rifles and ammo reportedly confiscated during the arrest were on display during that announcement. You can see them there on your screen. The State Department has confirmed a member of the U.S. military has been detained in the South American country. A spokesman saying they're also aware of, quote, unconfirmed reports of the detention of 2 additional U.S. citizens. In a statement, the spokesman is saying, quote, any claims of U.S. involvement in a plot to overthrow Maduro are categorically false. These alleged arrests come 2 days after the U.S. imposed sanctions on 16 of Maduro's allies, who the U.S. government accused of interfering with Venezuela's recent presidential election. So a lot to get to, a lot of developments. For more on this, I would like to bring into the conversation now the Professor Brian Fonseca, director of the Jack D. Gordon Institute for Public Policy at Florida International University. Brian, thanks so much for taking the time to speak with us today. As I mentioned, a lot to get to. But let's first start with this, these new sanctions against Venezuela that the U.S. has imposed. So what is the goal of these sanctions, and if you can detail them for our viewers?
Sure. So just earlier this week, the U.S. levied about 16 additional targeted sanctions. These are sanctions levied to the Maduro government, have aided in the government's ability to hijack the recent elections that took place on 28 July. The purpose of these sanctions is to essentially apply additional pressure to the regime in the hopes that they can get the regime to negotiating tables and find a pathway to a peaceful solution. This is not the first time the United States has levied sanctions. We've levied hundreds of sanctions over the years, targeted at individuals in the political elite, around the political elite, those that have contributed to the dire situation of the country today. And again, it's important to point out that these targeted sanctions are different than sectoral sanctions. In the past, the United States has sanctioned Venezuelan oil, for example. These are not those types of sanctions. Instead, these are sanctions targeted at freezing the money of individuals and freezing sort of the ability of individuals to move around the world.
So these arrests coming on the heels of those sanctions, the ones that I just mentioned, where a U.S. citizen is detained there in Venezuela, is this suspicious activity to you at all? Is this something that you expected from the Maduro regime? Could negotiations come from this?
That's a great question, and I think you're absolutely onto something there. Historically, Venezuela has arrested American citizens, of course, claiming the same sort of line of narrative now that these individuals were attempting to undermine the Venezuelan government in some form or fashion. But the Venezuelan government has leveraged these arrests as a means of bringing the Americans to the negotiation table in the hopes of having things like sanctions lifted. If you remember, late last year, the Americans had negotiated the swap of roughly 10 American citizens that were essentially arrested, detained by the Venezuelan government prior, in the hopes of sanctions relief, which again negotiations took place. Venezuelans received a temporary reprieve and sectoral sanctions on Venezuelan oil. In exchange, Americans, got roughly 10 hostages back. And so hostages have been leveraged historically for negotiating, in this case, negotiating to lift sanctions.
Let's talk a little bit about Venezuela's current allies and maybe their status with the U.S. Are they similarly facing restrictions like what we're seeing the U.S. is imposing on Venezuela?
Yeah, that's right. Most are. The allies that you might be referring to include Russia, China, Iran, Cuba. Of course, Cuba, has had heavy sanctions since the 60s. Iranian oil has been sanctioned as well, and there have been targeted sanctions against Iran. More recently, there have been an increase in sanctions against Russia, particularly post the invasion of Ukraine. And in fact, many argue that the invasion of Ukraine and the efforts to put sanctions on Russia required the United States to look at Venezuela and consider reprieving some sanctions on Venezuela, because the three countries I just named, Iran, Russia, and Venezuela, are producers of heavy crude and move oil into the global oil markets. And so there's been some challenges in terms of the ability to levy sanctions against all of them. Of course, you've heard a lot recently about the increased tariffs against China. So the United States continues to use financial tools, not just against Venezuela, but against Venezuelan allies.
I want to turn to another big headline that we saw just a few days ago. Maduro's plane was seized, I believe, in the Dominican Republic. Right now, the U.S. having control of that plane. I want to put up some of this footage that we have here. Talk to us about this strategy from the United States. What do you hope to accomplish with the seizure of his plane?
Yeah, that's a great question. That happened. It did happen in Dominican Republic recently. Again, this is pressure that the United States is placing on Venezuela, attempting to put whatever kind of pressure they can. Seizing his plane in Dominican Republic was just part of the portfolio of pressure, trying to signal to the regime that the United States is going to continue to attempt to suffocate Venezuela in the international community. And again, it's not unprecedented to do things like this, but certainly I think the Americans would have hoped Maduro would have been on the plane, because Maduro has been indicted in the United States on trafficking charges. And so I think, again, this is part of the U.S. efforts to put pressure on Maduro. And again, there are only so many tools they can use to put pressure. Sanctions is one, diplomatic, rhetoric, joint statements in multilateral fora like the United Nations and the OAS, and of course, seizing the President Maduro's plane was another one of those efforts.
Another major headline that we do have to talk about here, the opposition leader Edmundo Gonzalez now in Spain in exile. Is this something that you expected given the climate down there in Venezuela?
I think so. I mean, I think immediately after 28 July, a lot of analysts expected the Maduro regime to levy heavy pressure on opposition within the country. And part of this pressure was designed to address the massive social unrest that was happening across the country. Those supporters of the opposition that were pouring into the streets, in pursuit of, again, applying pressure to Maduro and demanding change with Maduro. And of course, Maduro needed, at least perceived the need to, target opposition leaders in the hopes of trying to address some of that mobilization taking place in the streets. Right now, most all of the major opposition leaders are out of the country, Edmundo being the last to leave for Spain just a few days ago. The only opposition leader left in Venezuela is, of course, Maria Corina Machado, who remains one of the biggest persons and leaders of the opposition. She has a tendency to be able to inspire lots of people out into the streets. Of course, she's in hiding right now because the Maduro government has continued to attack and pursue opposition leaders in the efforts of either jailing them or exiling them out of the country. And again, this is all designed to try to get the opposition unrest under control, because Maduro has no intention of allowing a transition back to democracy to occur at this time.
Speaking about the opposition and all of these supporters of that opposition leadership, what are they thinking right now down there in Venezuela? As you just mentioned, Maria Corina Machado, she is in hiding. Mundo Gonzalez is in Spain. What does that do maybe for the hope of people down there that we're hoping that perhaps they could get Maduro out of that presidential regime and bring in this new era forward?
That's a great question. I think, again, it might signal a decline in hope among the opposition. I mean, so far, the opposition has been very capable and intense in terms of its ability to move into the streets and demand change. Not having opposition leaders in country to rally those movements tends to erode those movements and that social pressure over time, which is, of course, what Maduro is trying to do. He's trying to erode the intensity and size of the opposition and the social unrest in the streets as a means of gaining control and continuing to move further away from transition back to democracy. And again, that's the challenge that I think Venezuelans are facing right now, is there aren't many left in the country to rally people in the streets, inspire people in the streets in ways that it continues to put enormous pressure on the government, the political elite, Maduro, the military and security institutions. And I think that's the biggest challenge that Venezuelans in country face. And as of now, the opposition that's out of the country is going to continue to work through the international community to apply that pressure from outside. Of course, El Mundo has already met with leadership in Spain. Opposition leaders like Juan Guaido here in the United States continues to work with and through the United States to apply pressure. And so opposition that go into exile tend to become activists in the countries that they're in an effort to put that pressure, international pressure anyway, back on Venezuela.
Brian, so many developments when it comes to this story of weeks after this presidential election, still so many calls, there's so much unrest when it comes to the people down there in the Latin American country, but really the global community at large that is watching this very closely. Is there anything that you feel that you'd like to add before I let you go? Anything we might have missed or something that you think our viewers should keep an eye out for in the coming weeks?
No, but the continued repression by the regime continues to cost, lives in Venezuela. We've seen dozens killed over the last, month and a half since the 28 July election. We've seen thousands detained and arrested. So the human rights violations continue to persist. And I think, again, the international community needs to continue to find ways to isolate Maduro and push Maduro towards some type of peaceful solution in an effort to allow voices in Venezuela to determine the path that they want under, the context of democracy. And I think that is not going to happen unless there is enormous pressure from outside, but also enormous pressure from inside. Venezuelans are going to have to take this fight further and continue to demand that Maduro hand power over, try to fracture the political elite, try to fracture the armed forces or security services, which continue to hold a grip or enable Maduro to hold a grip on power. And I think that the international community needs to continue to highlight this. Organizations like yours and Fox need to continue to keep a spotlight on the human rights violations and continue to place pressure on the regime, demanding transition back to democracy.
Brian Fonseca, the director of the Institute for Public Policy at Florida International University. We always appreciate your insight as we follow this delicate story out of Venezuela. Take care. We'll talk soon.
Thank you.
Of course. And as Brian was just mentioning, there continues to be international pressure based on this situation in Venezuela. Earlier this week, we did get a joint statement from the United Nations on that entire process. Let's listen into some of those remarks, very brief. Next.
And by independent observers show a different outcome than that reported by Venezuela's National Electoral Council, CNE. In light of the ruling by Venezuela's Supreme Court, we urge the CNE to immediately publish the presidential election voting results from all polling stations and upload for the impartial verification of results by independent observers to promote credibility, legitimacy, and transparent electoral process. We take note of the United Nations panel of experts interim report, which found that the electoral process fell short of the basic transparency and integrity measures essential to holding credible elections. The panel reviewed a sample of the actas in the public domain, which exhibited all the security features of the original result protocols. Now is the time for all Venezuelans to begin constructive and inclusive discussions to resolve this electoral impasse and restore democratic norms peacefully in accordance with Venezuelan electoral law and the wishes of the Venezuelan people. We are gravely concerned about the reported human rights abuses and violations following the elections, including those involving repression, arbitrary arrests and detentions, killings, denial of a fair trial guarantees, as well as intimidation tactics against the democratic opposition, including the raid of the opposition's headquarters. We express deep concern with the politically motivated arrest warrant by Venezuelan authorities issued on September 3rd for Edmundo González Urrutia that has forced him into exile. It is imperative to promote respect for human rights and fundamental freedoms in Venezuela, including the right of individuals to assemble peacefully without reprisal. On August 16, the OAS resolution, which passed by consensus, made the region's position clear. Our statement and actions at the United Nations, the OAS, and elsewhere are a testament to the strength of member states' commitment to promoting human rights and the rule of law. We fully support an inclusive Venezuelan-led process to reestablish democratic norms in Venezuela and stand by the millions of Venezuelans who continue to risk their life and well-being for a more democratic, prosperous, and secure Venezuela. Thank you very much.
Minister, Javier Ortega from FN News, where are you preparing or promoting a resolution on the elections of Venezuela, on the situation of Venezuela?
Here today?
Yes, not today.
No, we are just reading the statement because, as you know, even though we have an enormous number of countries here, we are in different stages in the Venezuelan process. For example, Panama has its own position, so I cannot talk before you because our position is well different to some of the countries here, even though we share the same goal, the restore of the democracy in Venezuela.
And what can the United Nations do at this moment?
The United Nations is promoting the fight for democracy in Venezuela, is promoting the fight for the rule of law, is promoting the respect for human rights.
Right, listening there to that brief joint statement that we had from earlier this week, courtesy of members from the United Nations, as the unrest continues after the presidential election in Venezuela. We're going to step away for our final commercial break of this hour. More to come here on Live Now from Fox.
I am safe and well. He said, nothing will slow me down. I will never surrender. I will always love you for supporting me. That was in an email today.
By the way, I have the Lester Holt quote.
Yeah, let's hear it.
Here's what he says, quote, this is Lester Holt. Today's apparent assassination attempt comes amid increasingly fierce rhetoric on the campaign trail, Mr. Trump and his running mate, J.D. Vance, continue to make baseless claims about Haitian immigrants in Springfield, Ohio, resulting in bomb threats. So once again, the moral equivalency, this idea as well that this assassination attempt comes amid that. Well, what are you trying to say exactly? That this is all, that Trump has increased the rhetoric and therefore this type of stuff happens. This is kind of like code for what the media does. And I keep bringing it up because I really think the media, you can really make the argument that they're a very dangerous entity the way they are today. I'm sorry to say that. I hate to say that, but I really think they're dangerous because they're not giving the actual full, how do I say this? Journalism and fairness has just kind of like taken a back seat to partisanship and ideology.
Well, and let's talk about something else here. And sorry, Billy, we'll get you to your point here in just a second. But I just wanted to piggyback off what David's saying about this media bias. One of the things that's a little harder to notice because it's not what's being said, but what's not being said. Former President Trump had that horrific first assassination attempt play out on camera. How quickly did that go away from being talked about in national news? I mean, that thing just like fell off a cliff and it just basically vanished. And then once it was clear that we had Kamala Harris running, that whole thing took on a life of its own in the media and they just didn't bring it up. I mean, the assassination attempt, other than Trump bringing it up one time, referencing it in the debate, was not brought up by the moderators at all. I mean, imagine that.
That's a great point.
What is bigger in the news cycle than the main opponent, one of the main two people running for president, getting shot in the head on the campaign trail, and it doesn't even get brought up in the debate by the moderators? That's something that you have to think about. But again, it's the more subtle of the two because you're just focused on what they're actually saying, not what they're not saying. But here we are again. They let that thing just kind of simmer down underneath and ignore it. And we have another person jumping up today as the rhetoric, as you said, heats up again. So,
yeah. Well, I was just going to say, we saw that during, as you were just mentioning there, during the debate, the way that it was handled. Some people have called it fact checking, right? Trump was fact checked. Harris wasn't, according to some. But you saw a number of claims that came from Harris. One of them, a pretty misleading claim about Trump. She said Donald Trump, the candidate, has said in this election there will be a bloodbath if the outcome of this election is not to his liking. And nobody fact checked that. But that's an actual claim that deals with. I mean, that instills fear in people, right? That this person, if they don't win, they're claiming there's going to be a bloodbath, right? That's actually a very dangerous claim when in reality he was actually talking about China and the car industry and really what would happen economically, it seemed, in the quote she was referring to. So the fact that those things aren't even being, quote unquote, fact checked, I think is a big deal. But again, Trump brought this up during the debate too. He said, and I was shot in the head essentially because of the types of rhetoric that we've heard from her, and he pointed to her. So we've seen this again and again, and the way the media handles it tends to be too one-sided, and there needs to be more self-awareness there on the part of some of these reporters and anchors.
Yeah, and I just want to underscore here, this is the Christian Broadcasting Network, and first and foremost, we need to be bathing this situation in prayer. We have to pray for the next person who might be thinking about this, for them not to do it, because who knows, you might have somebody who's got mental issues looking at this the other way, saying, hey, wait a minute, they keep trying to shoot my guy, and then they might take matters into their own hands the other way. And, you just have to pray right now for the country, because I don't think people truly understand what can happen if we keep going down this road and how ugly things can get in America if this is allowed to fester, if, as you've been saying, David, this rhetoric is not tamped down and we put an end to this threat to democracy stuff once and for all. Anyway, get your reaction to that.
Well, a couple of things. First of all, let's be clear. Donald Trump came in with a lot of bombast and a lot of rhetoric right at the beginning, and he wanted to turn over some tables. And boy, did he turn over more than a couple tables. He redecorated the entire house, or at least he's trying to. And in the process, what happened was, let's be honest, the elites of Washington in both parties got angry because he came in and said, you know what, we're not going to do business as usual. And so what happened was you had a lot of folks that said, sorry, I've got a nice little cushy situation here, and you're making me uncomfortable. And so they got angry at him for it. And so then they had a role in it. So if Trump had a role in it, they had a role in it. And then ultimately we're living in a topsy-turvy 180 world, as Billy said, with so many folks with mental illness, which is a real problem in this country. And we're living in a world of spiritual darkness. And when you put all of that together, you have this. You have a combustible situation. And I think that's where we are today. By the way, there's some news here about some folks in Congress. I'll have to get the names, but this guy, the suspect, Ryan Wesley Routh. Is it Routh or Ruth? I think it's Routh. I'll have to double check. He was lobbying members of Congress at one point. You'll see it there. He's all dressed up in a tie. He was on Capitol Hill. He met with members of Congress about Ukraine. I mean, he wanted funding for Ukraine. And so now there's an effort to get a disclosure as to who exactly met with this suspect. What Democrats, what Republicans, whoever it was. So that'll be something worth watching as well.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us, everyone, on this live stream. Again, unfortunate circumstances that we have to bring you tonight. Thankfully, former President Trump is safe after a second assassination attempt on his life today with a gunman with an AK-47 with a scope outside of his golf course in Florida. Secret Service agents found him, saw the muzzle of the rifle one hole ahead of where Trump was playing, about 300 to 500 yards away. And if they did not see him, it appears that Trump would have walked right into this trap, and he would have been right there at very close range. So he was flushed out and eventually apprehended. He's alive, so we'll see if we get more information in the coming days. So, guys, I just want to close with prayer tonight here. As we were talking about that, how prayer is powerful. We need to be praying for our country. So I'll start. We can take it around the horn, and then we'll close it out. All right. Heavenly Father, thank you so much for this day. Thank you for, first and foremost, your goodness, your grace, your mercy, your patience, your kindness with us that we don't deserve. And so let us keep our eyes fixed on you, Jesus, the author, the perfecter of our faith, first and foremost, before anything, because of all the problems that our nation has and the solutions that come from government officials. We know that the real solution in this country are changed hearts that have been changed for the gospel, that they understand they are sinners and that they need grace and they need salvation. So that's the only way you're going to get real, true change in this country. So I pray you draw more people to yourself, that more people open their eyes and turn their lives towards you. And so we pray that, and we just lift up this country and the one that was founded on you, and that it's the only country, and it's unique in that way, that puts you at the forefront of it. And so I pray that we return to that we look towards that, and that right now you would, in your sovereign grace and your sovereign power, just lessen the violent acts, the frustration that we're seeing in some people, and that you would keep this country from spiraling down that path.
Lord, I know that we are in a spiritual battle. The scriptures tell us that in Ephesians 6. Lord, we know that there's a battle between good and evil, and we get so caught in the material of it all that we forget that, Lord. I just pray for all of our leaders, whether we agree or disagree with them, from President Biden to Vice President Kamala Harris to former President Donald Trump, that you would just protect our leaders and give them wisdom. Give them your wisdom, Lord, to guide the country, no matter who is going to be next at the helm, that you would change hearts and just guide them towards you so that our country can be closer to where we should be, Lord. And just pray for everybody here who is, listening or watching, Lord, that you would guide our words and our actions over the next few months as we deal with a lot of tension in families and political drama in families and all the things that come along with a tense political season, Lord. We just thank you for all you do for us, and we pray that you would bless this country.
Lord Jesus, we know that you can take a bad situation and turn it around for good. And Lord, we just pray that specifically right now in this situation for what's going on with our political discourse in this country. Lord, I pray for all of those veils that are in front of people's eyes to be lifted spiritually, to be lifted so they can see you and your truth and not the craziness and the corrosiveness of this world, but that they fix their eyes on you, Lord. Lord, I just pray specifically for folks that are discouraged right now, discouraged to see the state of our country and concerned about the direction of our country. Lord, I pray that you give them sustenance. I pray that you give them spiritual sustenance. I pray that you just give them this attitude of that works against defeatism. Lord, I specifically pray, Lord, that you help them monitor what they watch on social media and how much time they spend on social media on places like TikTok and Instagram and others, because it can give you, obviously, Lord, as you know, a different sense of the world, like the world is coming to some sort of horrific end and there's no hope, but there is hope and there's hope in you. So I just pray, Lord, that our eyes are fixed on you at all times. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. All right, gentlemen, I appreciate that prayer. I appreciate all of you out there watching us tonight. And as always, if you haven't already, you can subscribe to the Quick Start Podcast. We'd love to have you with us. We're there each and every weekday morning, myself and Billy, Tragons Phillips. Sometimes you hear from all our other CBN reporters like David and analysts on the podcast as well. So we'd love to have you join us there. The Quick Start Podcast, you can find it on cbnnews.com. Appreciate you all being here and praying for the nation. And as we go through this troubling news today of another assassination attempt on President Trump's life, but we'll be covering it, that and more all week on CBN News. God bless you all. David, Billy, thanks for joining me. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Dan. Thanks, Billy.
All right, good night, everybody.
Right, that is it, folks. I've been live for an hour and something minutes. So thank you. Subscribe, like,